Okay, welcome everybody. This is Mark Vogt, practice manager at Emtec Consulting and the host for the last couple of years of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. Today is the October 10th session. I hear a little hissing in the background somewhere, like somebody might have a window open or something like that. If you can limit that, thank you very much. We've actually got a really fun session today. Hopefully it's going to be jam-packed. As many of you know, Ignite 2018 was phenomenal. It was 2 weeks ago. It was in Florida. It's Microsoft's premier event, somewhere in the neighborhood of 35,000 attendees this year. We're down in Florida, descending on it from something like either 18 or 80 countries, a ton of countries. And what I thought we would do in this session was to try to identify people that have been members and attendees of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group on and off, try to find a cross-section of people from various different roles in, like you would see in any organization, and ask them what their takeaways were about Ignite 2018, which is really, we're trying to cram 5 days into 40 minutes, 5 days into 45 minutes. We're going to be taking over with that in just the next couple of minutes, but we are going to try to cover some of the basic items that are part of our traditional agenda. So welcome to the SharePoint Users Group. Our guest speakers today are Michael Blumenthal, Ralph Rivas, we've seen them before, but two new people, Chris Evans, the Director of IT at Griffith Foods, down in Alsip, Illinois, and Aabir Rizvi, a SharePoint admin and solution architect with Signode packaging up in Glenview, Illinois. Welcome, guys, and thanks for actually being here with us today. I appreciate it. Today's agenda looks like this. SharePoint, the big picture, will be very brief in that area. The SharePoint news and events. Then we're going to segue right into my Ignite 2018 highlights from Michael, from Ralph, from Chris, from Aabir. Most of these people attended. Some of them attended virtually, i.e. via streaming video, and Ralph is going to give us a chance to talk about that. As time permits, I'm going to be showing you guys an AI-powered, a machine learning-powered Power App. This is a sneak peek at a possible SPS fall event. In lieu of an entire SharePoint Saturday, it's going to be a SharePoint app in the morning. Let's see what I'm talking about there. SPS is actually thinking of SharePoint Saturday. The gurus that have been bringing you SharePoint Saturday in the spring and in the fall for the last 5, almost 10 years. We're not able to put an entire event together for the fall, but they are thinking about what we'll call an app in the Saturday morning. Many of you out there may have actually heard or even attended an app in a day seminar that have been put on since this spring, typically in downtown Chicago during the weekdays. There was one in midsummer. It actually went really, really well. There was supposed to be another one in the next week or so, but I was told it was actually canceled due to a lack of registration. It got me to thinking that maybe the reason is not because people aren't interested in Power Apps, but because they can't pull away for an entire work day. But what if they could pull away for a Saturday morning? Would that be of interest? So I'm going to ask Dina, while we're talking today, to try to set up something that looks like a little poll for us that says, would you be interested in an app in a day? And what it would entail is actually building a Power App as a core, using SharePoint to store the data, Microsoft Flow to process new incoming data from SharePoint, but also hand it off to some machine learning models created in Azure ML services, and that we're actually going to treat them like web services. You give them some information, they give you a piece of information back, just like any other web service. So that at the end of the morning, you will have built a 3-screen Power App that actually ties to a SharePoint list that has one Microsoft Flow that grabs data out and goes into the machine learning library, and you will have built with your own 2 hands 2 simple predictive analytical models actually using the ML Studio and services, the free stuff. And you will have exposed that as a web service and learned how to use that in Microsoft Flow. You'll walk out, in other words, with a working AI-powered Power App to show your company. Some kind of seed planting that we believe firmly is actually going to take off once people see the power. If you're interested in this, do 2 things. Contact us out on LinkedIn. Get out on our LinkedIn group and let us know that you're actually interested. Or hopefully Dina's going to be able to come up with a brief little survey or a poll that lets us know your level of interest.
So let's see if this works.
Okay. I see poll open, a little window popping up.
Okay, everybody submit your answer. Would you be interested in participating in an app in a Saturday morning?
And Dina, it won't let me do any screen sharing until that poll's done, it says.
Nope. And I'm going to give everybody 3, 2, 1.
All right, cool enough. Dina, can you tell me if you guys can see the screen sharing still now?
Yep, we're good.
All right, let's continue. Time to actually segue. SharePoint news and events. That's typically my thing. Really, the big deals are upcoming in December, the SharePoint Fest, and possibly in October and November, SharePoint Saturday App in a Day in the Morning, quite possibly at DeVry in Bartlett. That seems to be the go-to place for SharePoint Saturday out in the suburbs. Stay tuned on more for that. We'll be using the LinkedIn group, the Chicagoland SharePoint users group up on LinkedIn to communicate that to people, as well as using LinkedIn and possibly sending out an email blast. Today, for the rest of the session, we've got a cross-section of attendees, IT directors, SharePoint administrators, MVPs, and architects. Let's hear what they have to say. In the interest of time, well, actually, Michael Blumenthal, we're going to tee you up first. Are you ready?
I am.
Michael, handing to you in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
It's all yours.
And let me make sure I'm showing the right screen here. Okay. Please confirm that you can see my slides.
We can. Office 365 news and events. You got 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
So let me do this as well. So that's going. Okay. So I had the pleasure of attending Microsoft Ignite once again. I've gone to all of the Ignites. I've lost track of how many there are. They started in Chicago. And so I want to cover both news and as well as a few upcoming events. So the Ignite news that I want to cover really starts with a big announcement they made, and I believe it was during the keynote, about passwordless sign-in. And this is about how Microsoft believes they're really ready to make a big inroad in killing off passwords. Passwords are the #1 security weakness in most systems today. And so they took an app which I kind of thought is a relatively obscure app, Microsoft Authenticator, and suddenly gave it a lot of new prominence in the fight for enterprise security. And so what they demonstrated and what they announced was that Azure Active Directory applications, anything that gets secured by Azure Active Directory, will support passwordless sign-in. And so passwordless sign-in uses multi-factor authentication. Hear a lot of background noise, if someone could please mute. Uses multi-factor authentication with the idea that the multiple factors are a minimum of 2, something you have and something you know. And by providing your email address, your Azure Active Directory login, the application you're logging into displays a random 2-digit number to you, and your authenticator application on your phone then prompts you to pick the matching number. And by doing that, you do 2 things. One is because it's on your phone, it's something you have, and then by picking the right number, that's something you know. So that verifies your identity. And so it's this passwordless way to sign in. And the key here is that prompting you to pick the right number makes you think about it. One thing that Microsoft has seen from a security perspective is that multi-factor authentication is good, but if you prompt someone too often to authenticate, they will start blindly clicking approve. And then if someone hacks their account and triggers that, they will see the pop-up and approve it even if they aren't signing in. So by having them do this magic number match, that's intended to make them think about and prove that they're actually signing in. So that was a big security announcement. The next one was a big announcement about Microsoft Search. Microsoft Search is this cross-product search experience where you can search from office.com, you can search from every Office application, you can search from Windows, you can search from Bing, and you'll be able to search all of your enterprise content. And so we're going to see this coming soon to the Office desktop and web applications. They announced that Bing for Business is generally available, and My other user group, the Office 365 Adoption User Group, in our February meeting, one of our members is going to demonstrate Bing for Business. And then there was a session called BRK 3023 if you want more details on that.
And Mike, you'll provide us with a reminder of that particular event so that we can add it to our calendars?
Absolutely. I'll remind you in the January meeting. Another announcement was that their Secure Score product, which is really this sort of one number metric by which you can measure your security posture. They're expanding that from covering just Office 365 to now covering the entire product suite across EMS, Azure, and I believe Windows as well. And so it's a much broader portfolio of security metrics that they look at to give you your Secure Score number.
And bigger is better. The bigger the number. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So going back to that, for example, you get credit in terms of score points for things like having 5 or less global tenant admins, having multi-factor authentication required for all your tenant admins, having multi-factor authentication for all your users, and then it looks at all sorts of other security aspects and gives you a lot of ways to whether and it gives you different metrics you can use to that all combine to measure your security posture. And some of this is also can be, you may not do it with Microsoft products, some things like log analysis you might do with third party, and there's a way to say that in the scoring tool. So it's a very powerful thing they've been developing for at least, I'd say, the last 3 years or so, and now it takes a broader set of metrics than before.
And this score is actually for your entire tenant. It's not on a per person basis. It's for Emtec. It's for West Monroe Partners. It's for Signode packaging.
Right.
Okay.
Moving on to other announcements, Microsoft Teams had a lot of announcements to make at Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Teams, the product, had over 50 sessions, and there was just so much there. This captures many of the things they announced, and in both available now would be either actually in your tenant now or coming over the next week or 2 or 3. But very short term, and then coming soon, and things that are coming from between now and, say, most of these would be here by the end of the year, with some possible leakage into the first half of next year. One of the key things that I pulled out from there is role-based security for teams. So your admins, instead of your team admin having to be a global tenant admin or a Skype admin, there are now new admin roles that really map to the different support levels involved. So your team service admin is your top level admin for Microsoft Teams, and then it goes gradually more granular down to Teams Comm Support Specialist, which might be your tier 1 support analyst at your service desk. And your Team Comm Support Engineer would be tier 2, and maybe Teams Comm would be tier 3. Those are primarily around the calling and meeting features, because some of those ones are the ones that tend to need the most kinds of support experiences and have the most diagnostics that go with them, at least at this point. Moving on to SharePoint, there are again a huge number of SharePoint announcements. Hub sites got a bunch of love. Their hub sites will now roll up events as well as the things they rolled up before. They announced the join approval workflows. They announced increasing the maximum number of hub sites from 50 to 100. They announced a future capability where you can, from an existing hub site, create a new site, and when that site is created, it will automatically be joined to that particular hub.
Oh, so it's like the hub the site without you having to create the site and join it to the hub. Cool.
Right. Another big announcement: web part to web part communication. And I think, wait, we had that. Yes, we had that in classic web parts. It's going to be available now in modern web parts.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There's a lot of potential there for for rapid application development, no-code development, creating rich pages that have interactivity where someone does something in one web part and it changes the things you see in the other web parts on that page.
So that communication isn't necessarily one web part's pushing information to another one, but that one web part can be listening for events to happen in another web part and reacting to those events?
So it's this, my understanding is it's the same model as we had previously in Classic. And
Okay.
one of the common scenarios was the ability for one web part to filter another web part.
Right. Okay.
Lists are going to be available and supported as a first-class citizen when used as a tab in Teams. So SharePoint list integration, deeper integration into Teams. SharePoint framework web parts will work in Teams. And the big announcement was that they will have explicit support a magic PowerShell command for modernizing the root site. They actually demonstrated this in a root site. However, if you looked at the command that the PowerShell commandlet that they used, it didn't follow the naming conventions of the standard commandlets that they publish. And so we think that was demoware, and it's going to take a while for them to actually get it to the point where they release it. Hopefully a while is no more than a month or two, but they demonstrated that is a scenario they are supporting that is turning a root site into a modern site.
Okay.
And that'll make building your not so much building, but modernizing your corporate intranet, which probably lives in that root site, much, much easier.
Exactly. We have customers that have that exact same situation.
Yep. And spelling error here. The OneDrive team talked about all the things that they delivered recently and announced their one big announcement was the availability of files on demand for Macs. So this Windows feature where you can see all the files in your OneDrive or see all the files in a synced SharePoint library without actually storing all those files on your laptop. It lets you manage your laptop space a lot better, but also gives you that complete visibility into what you have. That files on demand capability is going to be available for Mac as well, starting with the Mojave, which actually is actually Mojave, a Mojave build of Mac OS. So I think that's a tremendous announcement, not only from the usability it provides, but it really demonstrates Microsoft's commitment to cross-platform support.
Sure. Cool. Mike, 1 minute.
Yep. So just two more things, which is Excel. They demonstrated pasting data from a picture. So being able to literally take a picture of a chart of data using your phone. Of course, OneDrive brings that picture over to you. Take a picture, copy and paste it into an Excel sheet, and Excel does the OCR and converts it into usable data for you. Very cool. Finally, Stream. Stream's now available as a mobile app, and that helps them put them back on track for replacing Office 365 video with Stream. These are all the things I talked about. I want to cover some upcoming events. Tomorrow, the Office 365 user group run by Doug Heminger and AJ Ram are also doing an Ignite wrap-up. So if you didn't get enough Ignite recap here, they've got an event too.
Cool.
Expo 2018 is an all-day workshop, seminar, expo thing that a number of the SharePoint ISVs are doing. Harmony, AvePoint, Microsoft, Firestart, BA Insight, Powell 365, and that's at the MTC on October 24th. You can follow that link to register for it.
And registration's still open? It's not filled?
I don't know. It's
At least try.
free, but I don't know how fast it's filling up.
Okay.
I think they did, and it was a sizable event. I think they had over 100 people registered last time I had a chance to talk with them. You mentioned, Mark, SharePoint Fest. SharePoint Fest is indeed coming to Chicago December 3rd to 7th. And the Thursday night of SharePoint Fest is the next Office 365 Adoption User Group, my other user group. Our event, we've got a panel discussion with speakers from SharePoint Fest talking about user adoption of Office 365. We also have a coupon code you can use to get 15% off of attending the conference. So you don't need to attend the conference to come to the user group meeting. User group meeting is free. The conference is a paid conference, very high quality. I'd say as good as Ignite, just smaller scale, a lot smaller scale. And here in Chicago, so no travel costs, or at least nothing more than parking. So that's all that I've got, and I hope to see you all at some of these events.
Mike, thanks a lot. Our next speaker, we're going to shift things around. I'm handing over to Chris Evans. Chris Evans is a director of IT with Griffith Foods. Chris, let us know if you can hear. You're ready to go. We can see your slides.
Yep, I'm ready to go. So I'll jump right into it. First of all, I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. Welcome to the group, but for me, it's brand new. This is the first time I've really been able to join. Mark asked me during some other conversations we were having. I've been in some user groups in the past, something I haven't done in a little while, been a little overwhelmed with some work, but starting to get a chance to get out back into the community. My background is I've been doing IT for about 30 years, 10 in medicine, 10 in newspaper, and a little over 12 now in food. A number of years before that, but I don't count those. What I work on now today are BI, analytics, SharePoint, information architecture, communication, collaboration, community finance, HR, and lots of other things. From my perspective, I kind of went to Ignite, and I'm going to break it down a little bit differently than Mark did. I really appreciate what Mark did because he kind of gave you a little more specific. I'm going to kind of give you a little more of the experience I had. This was my second Ignite. The first one was like drinking from a fire hose. This one was like being able to point it away from my head once in a while. But every time I did, it kept happening.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, it was brutal. But at the same time, it's a fantastic experience from that perspective. I really started to try to think about how to organize this. There's just so much information. I kind of came up with two approaches. The first thought I had was, well, maybe I should talk about the experiences I was after or what were the topics I was looking for or the things I saw. I was focused on things like user experience. Go ahead.
Kind of planned beforehand. You had like seen the tracks and said, I think I'm going to try for this
and
this.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely, exactly. So I tried before I went, not terribly successfully, but I tried to at least organize from this perspective, right? What is it I'm there to see? The problem is there's just so much. It's hard to, I mean, you could see this list alone. Any one of these, you could follow through the entire show and do nothing but one of them. And I was trying to do them all. So I found myself running back and forth. One of the things I was truly appreciative, and I think Ralph was going to talk a little bit about, is the recorded sessions. I am still trying to get through sessions I couldn't get to. So yeah, that was a big part of it. From my experience, I'm not going to read these off to you guys, but you kind of get the idea. I had a number of different areas. If you notice from this area, it wasn't a super heavy, what's SharePoint about? But from my point of view, the things I do, SharePoint is a kind of centerpiece to all of them, right? So we deliver information through SharePoint. We do that community collaboration and communication. As many of you know, SharePoint's behind Office 365. So when I talked to Mark, I said, some of what I'm going to share really isn't SharePoint, but it is indirectly. And so bear with me as I show a little bit of other things. I decided after kind of looking at this list and realizing I could literally go in any one topic that I would change it just a little bit. And I switched it over to a little bit of a technologies view. I'm going to do a super fast rundown of these and just highlight a few things that I thought, again, trying not to read off slides, but to give you some idea. I started out kind of looking at SharePoint. This is a SharePoint users group. So for me, there were a lot of questions around on-premise, in cloud, and hybrid, and what does that look like? Yes, I'm still asking those questions, even though we have kind of all three in place and started. I'm constantly looking for what the values are to each one and why, and trying to reach out not only to see what the platform's doing, but meet people and talk to the developers and understand. So that's a big piece for me. Some of the other ones, administration for me, I kind of revisited this. This is something everybody kind of has to have, but I think it's something we have to keep going back to. So you might build and have a really good environment and be happy with it. And then as time goes by, some things happen, whether it's the vendors you use, the product changes, some things happen. So this year for me was one of those years. I really wanted to look at some of the administrative components of it, spend time in sessions and working with people around security was a big one, and some of the permissions management components. Backup was a really big theme at the show, whether you talk about SharePoint or any of the applications. And while Microsoft's tools provide some degree of that, being able to manage your own and control it and see it was a highlight for me to really start trying to wrap my mind around what that meant. And then I really started to focus a little bit lower down, branding and user experience. I'll talk about those in a little bit. Large lists continues to be a huge challenge for me. We use SharePoint to not only kind of place things in, but we actually use it as a data collection and sharing. And so we actually have a number of things where we get very large lists, and they are a challenge for us to manage. The new modern experience has helped with that, but it's still not 100%. So constantly looking at that. And another big area I'll talk a little bit, which goes right into my next slide, is kind of workflows. From a flow standpoint, we currently use a third-party product, but I really wanted to take a very close look at Flow and Power Apps. Flow and Power Apps do things like process automation. That's certainly a component of it. SharePoint form customization for the online side for us, because we already have a tool for on-prem. As I mentioned, we do data collection, so having tools that can incorporate into SharePoint and then help us take the data through and collect it or improve it are good. And then things like BI enhancements, bots, these things are actually, Flow and Power Apps actually relate to this. You use these tools to get to those tools. And this was really a key learning for me. To see that I could use something that's really designed to be very graphical and easy to use and doesn't require, a data science degree to touch it, but then take that and go over and touch things like AI and reach into those and grab something out of it and use it, again, without this massive programming and skill set. Doesn't mean you don't need to understand it, don't get me wrong, but it certainly moved that to a more approachable solution and something that I could see, my team and other groups using. Again, I'm going to try to go through these pretty quickly. Power BI was a big topic for me. As I mentioned, I'm really responsible for analytics, business intelligence around Griffith worldwide. So this is something we're rolling out now. We've got a number of pilots, a number of programs out there. We've started building a lot. The big learnings for Power BI, one of the big things they always sell it on is its ability to be a visualization tool. And I think it's a good one. Is it the best? I don't know if I quite say that, but it's certainly up there. It's one of the best, and it's continually growing, and that I'll give it a lot of credit for. But what I really like about Power BI is it's more than that, right? There's other components, and this goes in, if you ever do the Gartner, right, it's the completeness of vision in conjunction with the usability, and the completeness of vision is the part here. Mark, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you that they knew they were entering a space where companies like Tableau and Kibana have been for years, and they're trying to go toe to toe. And like you said, they started off at 1.0, and in just 2 years, now it feels like they're at 5.0 instead of 2.0. They've really grown and expanded and tried to understand who the power user person is that would consume, that would leverage Power BI the most. I agree with you completely.
I think the thing that, no problem. The thing that jumped out to me was the data connectivity side. And at first you think, well, that means a connector to a data set. That's true. But things like Power Query to actually do data prep. And originally, I think these tools were designed for end users to clean up their Excel files and stuff like that. But I see coming in this tools that are actually going to be enterprise level and data analyst level tools. I think they're not 100% there, but they made huge strides in this area. Things like data flows, the connectivity to the common data model, which is my next slide I'll talk about in a second. I had to focus on things though like licensing and training and governance. Governance was a big question for me. So these are things that I'd encourage you to pay attention to. Mobile is a big thing. But the one area that if I were to draw out, something in Power BI, if you're already using it as a visualization tool, look at it for how you're getting to your data, how you can create data sets, how you can share data, and how BI starts to incorporate into the other tools. It's now part of Teams. It's part of a lot of the other functionality, so you can display, collaborate, communicate. So it grows beyond just the visualization. And I knew a little bit of this. This was really reinforced as, you know, as Mark said, instead of going from 1 to 2, it almost felt like we went from 1 to 3 or 5. It was a nice thing to see how much they've invested. Try to wrap up a few others here. Common data model was something fairly new to me. I had heard about it throughout the year, but I really wanted to dig deep. This was a case where I went around the show, and for those of you that haven't been there, there's really kind of 2 ways, you know, to get information. One is through the sessions, which are fantastic in many cases, but then to reach out and talk to program directors and developers actually working with and creating the tool. And this was one of those cases where I really wanted that point of view. I've heard a lot about the common data model recently, particularly for us working with Dynamics 365, talking about how to get the analytics out of Dynamics 365 through the common data model. The number one question I asked Microsoft and the developers versus the people selling it was, would you recommend this as the analytic tool? And they said, no. It is the connection, it is the tool, but things like data flows and some of the other tools with it are what you need to do. You do not want to be running heavy analytics directly against this model. They wanted it to be, but it's not quite there yet. So you're going to need some of those other tools. This was directly in confrontation to some of the things my other business partners, my peers, have been told about this product. And so I really wanted to get that story. It doesn't mean you don't use it. It doesn't mean it isn't critical. It doesn't mean any of that. But what it did mean is you have to be aware that there are some other things you're going to want to do to really take advantage of this. The other big place that this came into play was Flow and Power Apps. And again, getting that data. So this data model into tools like Dynamics, but then over in Flow and Power Apps goes back to how you might incorporate this into what you're doing with SharePoint. And the last piece that I still need to learn more about, but I started to get some information around, was the ability to customize this model. Not only use what's being built by Microsoft. The big announcement with Satya is that they want to build on this concept with their larger partners like Adobe and SAP, but I think they want to do this, you know, much wider than that. But then to also bring in your own custom point of view.
Yeah.
Last couple, and I'll wrap it up. How much have I got, Mark?
Couple of minutes. You're doing fine. Right. You're on a roll, so keep going.
All right, almost done. A couple more things. The Azure side of things. So this is an area where we're just really starting to move into. We don't do a heavy amount of Azure, but I do see it coming in our future. This really starts to speak to a little bit of the data science side of things. And over the last few years, I've really seen data science start to mature. The problem is, up until I would really truly say this year, I've always kind of felt, and I consider myself pretty skilled in this area, but I've always kind of considered this a area for IT people by IT people. We've had a lot of data in SQL, but the science end of it, some of the machine learning, the AI, the big data, these things have always been pretty difficult. And what I saw this year, what I took away from the show, was I think this is going to be a pivotal year. I think we're starting to see the foundation and the tools, things like the way Power BI connects, the common data model, data flows, data factories. I think, Mark, at some point you're going to show a little bit about what I saw in the AI and ML stuff and how you could potentially use that. The accessibility of this, to really start using it, was a huge takeaway for me. Now, have I got it all figured out? No, but I did walk away from the show feeling like if you're in data, if you're working with data right now, this is a year where you want to start paying more attention to this. I would say this is the year where you want to start thinking about what it might do and maybe challenge yourself with a pilot or two or little pieces. And there's a lot of them out there. They're starting to develop these patterns. And then the one thing I shared with Mark in a different conversation that I would share with you guys, just something that really resonated very well with me on the ML side of things that I took away. And it's super simple, but it was just something that kind of, I don't know why, when I saw it, it really stuck in my head. Was this last sentence. When you take in what we're used to, you know, my 30 years of experience tells me you take some input, you put it through some kind of function, some kind of process, and you get an output. This is what we're used to. What machine learning really does is kind of change that, and you take an input and you take an output and you end up with that function, that process. And you might not even know exactly what that is.
Yeah, that magical black box function that you don't know how it works.
And everybody I talk to always says, but I want to know what that is. And I'm like, that's what I want to know too. And that's the hard part about letting go, right? Is to understand what it does, but not what it is.
Understood.
So,
and like you said, Chris, Microsoft has gone out of its way with the machine learning studio and the services to start making that accessible to the power users, not just the monks up there in the world of BI and data science. They've actually started to operationalize and make accessible that kind of functionality. This is what you guys will see in that app in the morning functionality. It's a demo that Chris saw a couple of days ago at Griffith Foods that I brought to him. I think that's what he was referencing, wasn't it, Chris? The ML stuff? Yeah.
All right, last couple things here I'll hit on. Teams, Yammer, Office, all the fun parts of Office 365. I kind of clump these into an area of communication, collaboration, and community. That's kind of how we drive this area of the business for ourselves. Of course, SharePoint comes back into the mix here because it's an underlying component and a big front-end component to this. For us, one of the things that I was focused on is Teams. We have a rollout kind of heavily in play. We've been at it about a year. And one of the big things is that I see Teams in particular having a little bit of SharePoint's early days, where it was, if you build it, they will come, and they do come, and they build tons of things, and then you get that huge organic growth, and you find yourself hitting the next governance. So I spent a lot of time, and I saw a little bit of Mike's messaging there, but things like the ability to have a global admin page. That was huge. Right, that's almost like how could you have released it without it? But they did, and so these have been some of the struggles I've been facing.
I know exactly what you mean.
And it feels like, I mean, for those of you on this call, I think you guys could appreciate this more than most. You know, SharePoint had this world, right? That's what Teams kind of felt like when it first. I think it's going through a much faster process.
Yeah, an evolution.
Than SharePoint did, an evolution, good word. I think it's going through a much faster evolution. It's taking advantage of what they've learned from SharePoint, but there are some of those repeated mistakes. The other big thing was third-party governance to this. So if Microsoft, as Microsoft is learning, that's great, but it's also, I started finding myself trying to think about what are the third parties that can help me in the meantime while I'm waiting for those to mature and evolve. The Power BI integration I mentioned. The last thing that I'll kind of point out, and this was kind of an evolution for 2 years of Ignite for me, was really the understanding between Teams, Team Sites, Yammer, and all of those. And we had a little bit of a challenge happen here, and I don't know if it'll resonate for you guys, and that challenge was we had a lot of people who started saying, well, I'm going to use Teams, I don't have to use SharePoint anymore. And that kind of hit me in two ways. First of all, it's funny because so much of Teams is SharePoint, and they're not realizing that. But it's also this idea that one replaces the other, and I don't think that's true. But a lot of people are like, oh, I'm kind of sick of SharePoint, so I'm so happy to have this new tool that replaces it. And I really kind of nip that in the bud as fast as I can, because I want people to understand, yes, Teams is a great tool. Yes, it provides some wonderful new things, but it isn't necessarily a replacement. It's an enhancement, if anything.
Yeah, more
so
like
that education is going to be forward. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I said it's more like a new skin on an existing technology.
Yeah, I see it as a front end to SharePoint in many cases.
Yeah.
Based on the conversation here, I'm going to skip past my next slide. I put a little bit of notes, just things of mine that I was looking at. I talked to vendors on things like user experience. I talked to vendors on administration. I talked to vendors on workflow. Those are probably the three big third party that I talked to. Be happy to share those offline, but in this conversation, I think maybe I'll skip past that. The last thing I'll leave you guys with is just some super high level thoughts, right? If you're ever considering it, even if you look at it from a perspective of digitally attending, which I do think it would be a great option. I did some digital attendance while I was there because I couldn't get from one place to another fast enough. I found myself finding a place, sitting down and watching certain pieces in digital, and it was a great experience. But there's a lot of knowledge in one place. There's just a massive amount being presented in so many areas. In my case, that's brutal because I am literally responsible for so many of those areas. Right. If you can focus that a little bit, that's great. A chance to meet so many vendors. I think sometimes we take for granted this, and so I want to give a shout out to the many vendors that showed up there, because sometimes for me to get these conversations in, I get a lot of calls, a lot of cold calls, a lot of things, and people want a half hour a day of this or that to try to talk about their product or try to explain it over the phone. To be able to kind of reach out, and Ignite did a really nice job of organizing things around topics. So the vendors themselves were organized around topics, which was kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah.
It can be overwhelming. Make sure you eat well and get rest and are prepared if you go. And then I felt
two people. Don't go alone. Take one other person at least.
Yes, I would agree. That was a great. We actually had 3 from our group go, and that helped a little bit because we could separate at least by the topic, some of the topics. The last few things, opportunity to dig deep is there. Finding people like the program developers, reaching to those, not just meeting a vendor, but going to these sessions, and then going and meeting the people working on the software was a huge advantage. And then I just felt like it was nice to see some of these overview sessions as well, to see where things are headed and what's being invested. That would be my, as fast as I can make it, overview.
Fantastic. Well done, Chris. Thanks for all of the contribution. I had no doubt you're going to be able to get a lot packed into the time that you were given. We're handing over next to Aabir Rizvi. Aabir, ready for you in 3, 2, 1. And watching for his screen. Tell me if you can.
Yeah.
We're seeing the edit mode, now the present mode. You're rocking. Go ahead.
Got it. All right. So first of all, thank you very much, Mark, for inviting me.
Sure.
It was great listening to Chris and Michael. I mean, you guys had me take out a lot of information that I was going to talk about. So a great job there. Both of you talked about, pretty much all the major news. So, Mark, I'm gonna keep an eye on the time, and I'm gonna try to keep it short. So, everyone, I attended the Microsoft Ignite conference. I highly recommend, just like anybody else would tell you. Yes, I agree with Chris that I was also there in the conference. Sometimes, you just get tired of walking and doing a lot of things. So you end up, just logging in and just, in one of those sessions and just, watch the live stream. And that's definitely an option. So if you just cannot make it out to the conference, there's ample sessions going on. You can just live broadcast and just, set aside time to watch those sessions. You will miss out on those key components that Chris and them talked about here that it's pretty critical, is to go out there and meet with those the product engineers and the managers that are straight up coming, that own these products, to ask those one-on-one conversations and so forth. But aside from that, it was a very good conference. A lot was I'm just gonna take you guys right through this. 1 second. I'm gonna try this out. I picked out a slide deck that I'm just gonna quickly run through, but I'm gonna jump around and show you guys a couple of other resources and information that I think would be key that was not covered. This deck is an extract of what I took from one of the sessions I attended. Just FYI, disclaimer there. It's around content collaboration for the modern workspace. So once again, my name is Aabir Rizvi. I'm a SharePoint application architect, and I work at Signode Industrial Group. Before I jump in, I'm gonna, 1 second. I think 1 second. I wanna quickly, highlight one other information. In the keynote session,
Okay.
There was an announcement for
right now.
you guys can see my screen?
Yeah, we see a browser that says Adobe, Microsoft, and SAP announces.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up. I just wanted to kind of highlight that that was announced too. Adobe, Microsoft, and SAP, they announced, an initiative to empower the new generation for open data initiative. So I just wanted to all of you know that I can share this article. You guys can read through this. I thought that is kind of good, how the, three big corporations are kind of coming together, and, all three of these CEOs were on the stage. They talked about it. So I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm trying to bring up some information that is not being discussed by the other folks. So this is something, that could definitely bring some goodness in the world of technology and so forth. The other thing that I will also share is a guide to the modern experience in SharePoint. This was also something that was released during the conference. I was talking to one of the engineers, and my question was, because I have a lot of interest in the upcoming hub site, and Microsoft was pushing and talking about how great the hub sites are, and we should adapt to it, and we should look at it. So I went up to one of the engineers and I talked about, okay, what do I need to do? I have an existing hierarchical structure for my SharePoint sites. I have, our root site, then department, and underneath that our IT site and subsites for teams, and infrastructure and SharePoint, and just like that, the entire lay of the land is, I'm pretty sure that's how, some of you guys on the call have an existing structure too. The question was, how do you go from structure to the modern, modern point or the hub site structure? So one of the emailed me this link, which is the guide to the modern to the SharePoint site, and I will share that with you. I think this is a good starting point to understand what the information architecture is, and how it will change, and how we will need to repositioning or flattening the structure of our SharePoint environment is required for that. How is branding will be inherited down from your hub sites to the site, how the navigation is going to be. So this is a good article that I thought I would bring it up and I would show you, and I can share it back in the chat session to you, Mark, and maybe everyone can take advantage of that.
Exactly. Thanks. Yeah.
Got it. Jumping back to the slide deck here, I just want to quickly go through the modern SharePoint space. We'll give it 1 second for it to come through. I'm sorry. I think I'm having some trouble here.
There it is. You're good.
Okay. So what I have is, so SharePoint, they talk about that, is packed with security, has the artificial intelligence plugged right into it, and is bringing features to make it extensible. Will produce to allow people to access files by using OneDrive across different forms, including MacBook, as you heard. The document collaboration is easier with Office apps. The shared content teams in Outlook is also available and even more robust. The internet sites in Yammer, along with Stream, will make it much more simpler for organizations to take that to the next level. And the Power Apps and Flow is taking the business process automation to the next level. In fact, they have they did some comparison in some of the other sessions with taking Flow, comparing it with SharePoint Designer workflows, and they checked different columns saying, this is exactly how you can do things in Flow. This is checked, just kind of giving a comparison that this is actually the successor, and everyone should be using Flow instead of designer workflows is the message that I got out of that. Okay. Moving on. Employee engagement across organization. There's a URL that you guys can go to exploresharepointspaces.com. But the idea was that these SharePoint spaces are immersive and engaging mixed reality experiences for everyone. And it's for everyone. It will empower the creators, powered by AI, and integrated and extensible. So again, the message is
what that Aabir, people are wondering what that mixed reality actually will look like. Did they give you any demonstrations at Ignite? Aabir?
Yeah, one second.
I know I've seen demos where you're actually browsing into a website like it's a room. So suddenly all of these virtual collaboration spaces really are just that. They're spaces, and you're actually navigating into rooms and seeing your data, which I thought was kind of cool, but it's not the only metaphor, the only mixed reality experience I think they're working on. I don't know what else they demonstrated at Ignite.
Well, I think it was just demonstrating around what the AI is able to do in terms of search, and it's leveraging the cross-platform search functionality. It's allowing the SPFx with allowing the headers and footers to be inherited down, and just a component of Hub, how they're bringing it together. They're kind of giving it the engaging mixed reality experience from that perspective, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Aabir, less than 1 minute. We got to give the last 6 minutes to Ralph, okay?
Okay, got it. I think I'm just going to share the slide deck with you guys so that you guys can take advantage of this. All in all, I think this was a great conference. SharePoint Hub site is the way to go. Power Apps and Flow are even more mature at this point. We are certainly looking to replace all InfoPath application with Power Apps and go down that direction, that path, and leveraging Flow to its fullest capability and replacing some of the SharePoint Designer workflows. Teams is, of course, there were plenty of sessions on Teams. It's a collaboration, tool that's available, that was talked about greatly. I highly recommend everyone attending Microsoft Ignite sessions. Conferences coming up again in Orlando next year. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Aabir, thanks very much. And you also saw a couple of side-by-side comparisons of Power Apps versus InfoPath, of Microsoft Flow versus SharePoint Designer workflows, to show how Microsoft has actually met or exceeded all previous functionality with the new technologies, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So everybody, that was a big takeaway for a lot of people that I heard from, that they're not just the heir apparent and they're 90% of what we've had in the past. Power Apps, 90% of InfoPath, Microsoft Flow, 90 or 80% of SharePoint Designer workflows. Now they're more than 100%. They match and exceed what's been available in the past. And that's what really got me jazzed, especially in Microsoft Flow. All right, Aabir, fantastic. Thanks for very much for that. Ralph, I'm going to ask you to do the best you can in the 5, maybe 7 minutes that you got left. And
I'm going to do my super fast voice. Okay, done.
We've all been in this space before. We can see your desktop right now.
You can see my desktop, so that means that I didn't click on show it all. Here we go. Slideshow. Ha-ching! Breaking news.
Looking cool. Go ahead.
SPDev. Yes. Okay. So here's the big thing. So I'm Ralph Rivas, a principal consultant with Magenic. I consider myself a collaboration evangelist, basically trying to get people to collaborate. Yes, work together because it's good. Essentially, this is what we do every day, right? We're all collaboration people. We are all collaborating and work all the time. Why does someone have to come to tell you to collaborate? Oddly enough, it's because everyone, once they get into their silos or whatever it is that they're doing, they just stick to it And what used to be the whole point of getting all this software out there for everyone to participate and get together with each other suddenly becomes the reason for them not to. And so we still need us evangelists to come out and say, dunk them in the water, slap them in the face, and say, hey, look, get religion. And yeah, they never left you, basically. So also, I'm a practice leader in our group, so that helps a little bit because folks get to, let's just say, ask me stuff, and the fact that they ask me means I have to get answers. As they say, the teacher ends up learning more than the student. And in that act, I got to improve my skills over the many years, and I've been doing this for quite a while now. So my information is a bit more redacted in a number of years. So we'll get there. If you're my friend, I'll tell you. Get in my LinkedIn, maybe you'll see. All right. Cool. So this is called the post-Ignite edition. Now, here's the thing. As he said, I did not go to Ignite. So why are you here? You did not go to Ignite. I didn't have to. You could stream it. All right. Hold on a second. Say, oh yeah, just the keynotes, right? I said no. You could actually stream any of the courses that were essentially not having a technical difficulty at the time, but just about any course. Did it cost you, Ralph? No, it didn't cost a cent. But it did cost me time. All right. Yeah. So here I am. I'm working. I have regular work that's going on. Fortunately, my current environment, what I'm doing, has a lot of, okay, run it and wait. Run it and wait. Good old long-running batch jobs. You sit around, you let it run. The PowerShell piece takes forever to go. Hey, great, I can actually catch up on something while in between. All right, so this is what I would do. Just shadow it. So off hours, lunchtime, anytime, I could watch any piece whenever I wanted. And I didn't, again, I didn't have
like a third monitor thing. Stuff it in the third monitor.
Right. So now, again, here's the difference, right? Okay, so why would you pay $2,000 then if you can just get all that stuff for free? Well, as you've been hearing earlier, there is a difference. The interaction and the people you can get there, and I know because I was at the first Ignite conference, and let me explain. Ignite, of course, doing what they're doing is not new. They've done this before. It was called Tech Ed, and they've done it for years. And I attended just about every Tech Ed until 2005, pretty much, and even the last one for that matter. In fact, in the last ones where I met all the purveyors of what is SharePoint today. That's where I got to be their buddies, got to drinking with them, and got to be on their good side. So big, huge difference from being there than not. Now, but that means, though, if you cannot go, it would behoove you to attend via stream. Do not let that opportunity go. Now, here's a great thing. For the folks that come back, they can watch it, but we'll talk about that in just a moment here. All right, so key announcements. I'm hoping you can see the announcements and not my little, let me turn off this, undock my panel over here and minimize.
We see it just fine, Ralph.
All right, trying to minimize the panel on this side. Here we go, got it. Different paradigm. All right, so key announcements on the dev side. This is the dev side of things now. MS Graph is official. Oh, here's another little caveat. I attend the SIGs. You might have heard of those. Those are the special interest group meetings that Vesa Yuvinen and the SharePoint development team hold practically every other week. These guys are the most prolific of the group. The PNP group is the model for the rest of Microsoft on how to engage the community in open source and getting everything else going. Technically speaking, because I attend that all the time, a lot of the things that were announced were not really, let's just say, earth-shattering. For me, the earth-shattering stuff was the stuff that had nothing to do with SharePoint. Most everything else we knew was coming, it was expected. And so when SharePoint Framework 1.6 came out, which came out before Ignite, a lot of this stuff was already known and available. First one, MS Graph being official. The API coverage was not that much in the beginning when it was still being shown, and now it's huge. I was supposed to give this demo on this a couple of times, but I got really tied up. You'll probably see a proper demo now that we have more stuff to show. So we're going to look at that somewhere in the future. There's a link over there. If I share this, we'll probably take a look at it later. We'll actually take a look at this a little bit. All right, you can now call web APIs directly. This was a big issue where you wanted to talk to other services and everything else. There was a lot of hoops that you had to do to get around it. Basically, the only other way was to essentially do the old provider hosted apps. But now that is essentially native with SPFx 1.6. Deploy extensions tenant-wide. This is a big, big deal. What are those extensions? Those things you used to use JS Link for. So say, for example, you went in and you want all your footers to have a special big menu down at the bottom for whatever reason. You felt like that's your UX paradigm. It's going to work. It's great. And you want everyone to have it. Okay, well, before you had to, when you deployed this, you literally had to visit every single site collection and enable it. Oh, painful. Now you can just go tenant-wide, just like the web parts, tenant-wide, and deploy them. Done. Again, with 1.6. Now, and then there was stuff that they did announce, of course, which again, we know it's coming, but again, they're saying it's coming soon, Deploying web parts and app pages. I'll talk about app pages in a second. To Teams. I keep waiting for this to happen. This is my thing. This is when we say Teams and SharePoint being coming together. That is a huge deal. If I make a web part, it'd be great if that web part is automatically in Teams, automatically in SharePoint. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's not the paradigm for it, but it does make sense. Like if you create a web part that is, say, essentially a form or a report or something like that, great. Then you don't have to keep flipping around and going through all the systems. Speaking of flipping around, one of the things that was important was we talked about earlier, connecting across components, the web part to web part connection, and this concept of dynamic data. Dynamic data, imagine there's something on the page, say you've hidden it, or something on the page somewhere else, like say in the header or whatever, and you actually connect to it as your source of data. All right, so the old SharePoint sort of had something like it, not again full. This is actually 1 or 2 or 3 steps higher. The only reason why it couldn't be done right away, you're probably wondering, why couldn't it be done right away? It's because of the model that we're using. Essentially, it's got to be the web part running on the web part's running on the page. It's not like iframe or any of that stuff. So
Right.
There were security issues that made that not possible, and ways to break the system that hurt. Well, they figured it out, and it's coming. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it's going to be Christmas by the time this comes out, which is basically SPFx 1.7. Coincidence that it's coming out in December? I don't think so. I have a feeling SPFx 1.7, which they're not saying too much about it in relation to these items, are going to include those items. And so far, I've been predicting these versions correct. And now another concept, the app page coming soon. Now, imagine the web part. People are saying, hey, that's why people are writing Angular apps and stuff and trying to make it work in SharePoint. And you're like, what the heck are you doing? So, well, there's a reason why they're trying to do what they're doing. What they need is the full page concept, but they want to have all the doodads that SharePoint has, right? What the greatness of the current kind of new style web parts, but we want to take over the page. It's like, well, you shouldn't take over the page. Yes, we need to, because that is the paradigm. That's what we have to get to. Fine. So
That's
they created
how
app pages.
progressive web apps, isn't it? They want the page to look like an application.
Exactly. So this is the point of when you have app pages working, now this concept of bringing in stuff from SharePoint into Teams makes a whole lot of sense. Because what are Teams pages anyway? Because guess what? That's why I call it here. It's the gateway drug to Teams tabs becoming app pages. So people are doing development in Teams and creating these tabs to do stuff. Now, because that development model is going to come the same, I create a team tab and it becomes a quote-unquote app in SharePoint. The two have converged.
My God, we're developing. Who thought?
Yes, that's why, gateway drug, I'm telling you. All right. All right. And now here's the thing, though. Ignite's all great and well, but before we leave you, we got to leave you with some stuff that was super important that probably was discussed at Ignite at smaller rooms, the little things that you miss, unless you attend every freaking session and like make and drink Vesa to the floor and suck the information out of him or something. You're not going to get some of the stuff. Or you attend the SIGs. And I'll talk about that you should probably do. All right, one is this concept of adaptive cards, and we're gonna look at these in a little bit. Imagine just using JSON to set up those cards like contact info and everything else. Just JSON, just configuration, and poof, you have a card. Seems so simple, it seems so trivial, but it's actually super, super important because essentially it brings to the developer a way to really automate and really program what essentially the users have been able to do, unfortunately, with a little bit too much power on their UIs. Big deal. Next one, huge deal. Open source PNP SPFx human generator. How many times can I say that fast? All right. Essentially, what that is that scaffolder that we have for the SPFx. Well,
Right.
it just says React, and it'll do knockout for whatever reason, right? And it'll do like no things. But now, if you want to do your own, hey, you want to use Vue? Hey, sure. You really hell bent on doing Angular? Go ahead, try it. Can't wait for Angular elements as part of the framework? Hey, do it yourself or see here. Essentially, you have folks like Steven Bauer and some of these higher level developer MVPs that are very top level of these programs. And of course, with the full blessing of Microsoft on here, because look, guess what? Look at the link, developer.microsoft.com, talking about it. It's got the blessing. All right,
Cool.
So if you have to scaffold for your own company's very specific needs, this is the place to go, and it's open source. The next one, of course, the dev show. They have a dev show that you guys probably should pay attention to. If you can't make the SIGs, at least go and check out the dev show. All right, the dev show, at least you get Vesa and Waldeck with whatever special guests that are going on. They almost are like going to clue you into anything that's going to be coming up and going on. And you know what? You get to think about what the head of the Microsoft development team is thinking about. And if you see things in orange all the time, you're going to find out exactly why.
I hear you.
You want to get there. Oh, and hey, by the way, those tutorials you've seen, guess what? They've all been updated. You think, of course, they had to, right? So, by the way, there's a new link for where you get started with them, because actually, look, see, it's a new link because they actually put the month in there, September 2018. Of course, it'll point you to where they're all being flushed out of and everything else. But more importantly, if you have to do these again, if you have any training courses that you created yourself, like some people I know, you're going to have to go and update that. Finally, a couple of things. So you know about this site, roadmapwatch.com? It is a outside site that watches the Microsoft, the Office roadmap. You're going to want to take a look at that. Keep that handy in your thing. And finally, okay, so everyone's talking about, oh, there's so much stuff in Ignite. Even when I went to Ignite, I couldn't see it. Well, here's a present for you. Here's a link to a PowerShell that you can go get. It was done originally in 2016, where you can go and download all the slides and all the content.
All the video.
Ignite, all the video, everything, or at least the
5 days of video at 8 hours a day downloaded to someplace on your laptop.
Or at least the links to them wherever they are. Essentially, this is updated. Here it is. It's a PowerShell. Run it. Enjoy it. You're welcome.
All right, you guys, we're going to share that with you afterwards. We're going to be posting all of these slides up into our LinkedIn users group.
Okay, so yep, so that's no, it's not all. That's some, folks, because there's so much more, and Porky will never be able to ever say the full word. Speaking of Porky,
per usual, that's why we have you on every single month.
Yeah, so really quickly, just you'll see the links over here. There's the dev show that you're seeing right over here. This is, by the way, they have their blog. If you're not linked into their blog, it's very important that you get these links, get their blogs handy so you can see all the changes that are coming up. Because you can keep up with this, of course, and you don't have to wait for us to come up with this. There's a message card playground. There it is. And see, there's a card. That's what a card looks like, by the way, right over there. And right over here, you'll see the code that's going into it. Fine. Let's see. There we go. That's the OpenFX generator. So you can see that all the good stuff in here, how to get started, how to join, how to be part of the program, all that good stuff. The roadmap I talked about, there it is. Look, last check, features being tracked, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, great. And finally, let's look at the fact that you can enjoy the SIGs. All right, they have their recordings that get posted every month. So if you can't attend them, these are actually, if you're really serious about your SharePoint dev, if you're doing this, if this is your thing, you need to be on this. If you can attend, great, even better, participate, be there. If you're not maybe sharing your stuff, it's okay, consume it, but come here and keep up with what's going on. But otherwise, you can always look for the latest updates over here in the monthly summary, and you can go to their channel, or you can go and take a look at their blog. And in their blog, if you want to get the link to the Skype invite, which will soon be one day a Teams invite, you can come right over here and just click on the links and just find them.
Ralph, got to wrap up. Got to show the last slide.
Y'all done.
I'm switching over. Thanks, everybody. Watch the very last little item here. It's just to talk about next month. It's going to be more on Azure on MS Graph, because Ralph's talked about it. He hasn't had a chance to show the new stuff. More on the Azure AI tools and sewing it into SharePoint. More on Microsoft Flows, and even starting to talk more about hub sites. Real experience from Michael Blumenthal. It's going to be November 14th, before the holidays. Thanks, everybody, for staying a little bit later. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all of the presenters. You did a fantastic job. I'm tickled to death with today's user group session, and we'll see you guys on November 14th. Watch the LinkedIn users group for more information on the SharePoint Saturday app in the morning. Okay, everybody? Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.